Welcome to Investories, a podcast about real stories, real estate, and taking real action. Join hosts John Hooper and Kyle Robertson as they talk investing, mindset, and taking that first step. We all have a story. What's yours? The Investories Podcast.
Booyah! Welcome to the Investories Podcast, live from New York City.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Is that why you're all dressed up? You look really
I got to
nice,
go out
by
for
the way.
dinner in a minute.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Very nice.
I wore a shirt. And
You did wear a shirt.
I did,
Appreciate
yeah.
that.
So in New York, I don't think I'm going to buy anything too horrendously big here. There's a few skyscrapers with price tags and all that good
I
stuff.
just say don't rule it out. You know, not with that attitude, you won't.
But I need to get it seller financed.
That's true.
Speaking of which,
Oh, what a segue! Gosh, that was
we're stoked for you guys listening and girls listening because we have an absolutely two killer guests, Christian and Cody, and they are absolutely crushing it. There's no other way to say it, right? They are with multifamily strategy. So you can check them out, multifamilystrategy.com. They're on YouTube. We'll post all the links. But this conversation is exactly what Investories is all about.
Yeah, Christian Osgood and Cody Davis, super happy to have them on because, you know, when we get toward the end, we really get into the nuts and bolts of how they look at numbers and how they look at properties in relation to those numbers. And it's fairly mind-blowing, and it makes you feel pretty dumb, like I did, because these guys are
Guilty.
legitimately, these guys are legitimate. You know, they're the real deal when it comes to underwriting deals. And I wish that we had the time to dig into those numbers, and we are going to have them back on. But what the rest of the real meat and potatoes of this episode is them talking about their story, why multifamily, how they set up their deals, the types of terms they get, and it's 99.9% seller financing. And they do go, you know, kind of dig into partnerships and how beneficial they are. Really pay attention to that segment of this episode because they put out some really good information for why partnerships make sense.
I also want to add, welcome to our new format, and we're going to post shorter episodes. I was going to say less long, shorter episodes, and we're going to post them more regularly. We want to bring you your content sooner, and we want to bring it into a format that you can digest a little bit easier. So maybe you're commuting, maybe you're short on time, maybe you're grabbing a coffee. You can just consume this, and so look out for that as our episodes come out, and we're so excited to share this with you. If you like our content, if you like what we do, please do drop us a line, investoriespodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Instagram, check us out on YouTube, and I will post more YouTube videos. I'm a little bit slow on that. But yeah, get in touch. And here's the first part of the episode. Welcome to Investories, Christian and Cody, the multifamily strategy team, squad, bros. What do you like?
We will go with multifamily strategy bros. I think that'll be the first.
I'm going to add to that swordsman.
Oh,
And you have
there
to
we
watch
go.
the YouTube video for that. Sounds way worse than it was. So hey, so Christian and Cody have like really interesting stories. Both of you, like Christian, you've been slower burn, but you're still what, 30, something like that.
Yep.
30, super young.
Yep.
Cody
Old.
is Jedi levels of property. Yeah. So what I'm really interested to have this conversation and kind of learn as much as I can and impart that into our audience. So thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited.
We're excited to be here. Appreciate you.
So how did you get started? And maybe we do a back and forth between Christian and Cody. Who wants to take that first? Like, what was your route into real estate?
Yeah, well, Cody, you got started a little bit younger, so let's start with you.
Oh man, I always have to go first. Yeah, I got started at 19 years old. I was a real estate agent at the time. I'm no longer a real estate agent. I let that expire, my second renewal, so about 4 years after I got started. But licensed real estate agent, 19 years old, college dropout. Someone on Facebook told me to get my real estate license and leave college. So I did what any rational teenager would do, and I listened to some stranger on the internet. Was promised I was going to make a bunch of money. Didn't make any money. And 9 months after I started, I bought a 12-plex seller finance. So, you know, the huge.
We're going to get into that, Christian.
Yeah. So Cody then bought two more buildings, and around the time you were closing, you did a 12plex, then a 6plex.
Yep.
And while you were closing the 6plex, or a little bit before, I'd bought my first duplex. I had started in sales. So I did the college route, did 7 years of a sales career. I sold everything from pet food, apparel, into worked for a company called lands.com, which immediately got bought by CoStar, who owns LoopNet, So I was selling real estate, advertising, data, and I wanted to be a real estate investor. I forgot the part, and a lot of people do, where you actually invest in real estate. Being in real estate or being a broker does not make you a real estate investor no matter how bad you want to be. You, in fact, have to buy real estate. So 2020 hits. I'm an outside sales rep, and I'm not allowed to go outside to my clients. I was like, well, I'm done with this garbage. Went out, bought my first duplex with the money I'd saved. Met Cody in that time. Cody's like, you need to invest in Moses Lake. There's this duplex out here that's a total fixer-upper. You should do the project. I was like, okay. So I bought the duplex across the street from the 6plex that he bought, also seller finance. Mine was hard money. And I ran out of money. I got 4 units. I was like, okay. I spent 7 years earning the money to buy 2 duplexes in the house. I don't have any money. Cody has 30 units. I have 4. There has to be another way to play the game. And so I voiced this idea to Cody, and this is where the partnership started. I want to get to 30 units by 30. And Cody's response was, well, I can't help you because the deal I want to buy next is a 38 unit. I need a partner on, and they'll put you at 42. So you completely skip 30. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, Cody.
Accept. And that was our first seller finance transaction together. And here we are.
I've got 110 apartments. He's got 100 apartments, and we have a resort.
Yep. He has a 12. I don't, and I have a duplex. He doesn't. Other than that, partnered on everything.
And a resort. That's, I mean, I've got a million questions to start with, but I think we'll just start with one instead. So you don't have to answer all that at once, but I'm curious why real estate in the first place. We have a lot of people that are beginners in real estate that listen to our show, and a lot of people are looking for some inspiration, and everybody has a different reason for getting into either being self-employed or becoming investors, real estate investors, stock market investors, whatever. I'm curious if each of you wouldn't mind answering why real estate, why did you go that route?
Yeah, well, I'll share why I went that route, and then I'll also share why others should, because I've got a little more perspective than I did when I made the decision at 19. I was given a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, from a friend of my mom's when I was 14, and I read it, got super stoked, and then realized I was 14, so I put it back down. And I was in high school, 17, 18 years old, and my civics teacher said, come to the last day of school, we'll show you how to make money when you sleep. And I got interested. And then he talked about buying $5,000 houses in Tacoma. Well, now houses in Tacoma are $500,000. If you're buying a people box, you're not even buying a nice house. So that wasn't quite the same, but it piqued the interest again. I was doing some landscaping work and pressure washing at a friend of my dad's house. And he said, oh, you should join a real estate group on Facebook, because his contractor was there and he had done a flip. And so I joined this group on Facebook, and that's where that one guy messaged me and said I should get my license. So that's how I got into real estate. But the reason folks should get into real estate is it's much safer to borrow to buy real assets than it is to borrow and leverage into other investments. It's not super smart to borrow to buy gold, precious metals, stocks, because you need dividends to service the debt. And the easiest model I've found to service debt is through cash flowing apartments.
Yep.
100%.
For me, it's a control piece. I'd played around with different investments. I had a reasonable earned income. So I was like, okay, I have a little bit of money, and how do I want to invest it? So I played with the stock market. I was like, well, the problem with the stock market, yeah, even though I actually did pretty well, was I can't control anything there. I'm placing bets on what I believe will happen, and you can make educated guesses, but unless you're the CEO of the large company that you invest in, you can't steer that ship. So when something happens that has nothing to do with you, a CEO has a scandal, someone quits, the economy shifts, you're SOL. For me, real estate is an asset where you make more when you perform well. And for a lot of the stuff that we bought early on, we bought some assets that needed some love. One of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons people sell their finance is they have a property that's not conventionally bankable, but they really want to get their price. We picked up some of those. So we have properties where you make the money by being a better manager than the next person.
Which isn't hard.
Yeah, which is it's pretty easy to do on some of these. But that level of control, I can place an investment and then I can directly put my hands on it and influence the value and success of my investment. And that gives me control of my freedom instead of someone else. And so that was the reason for me that real estate was the way to do it. It's a physical asset. I can get my hands on it, and they're not printing more land. So there's always intrinsic value, which also helps.
Well, yeah, the control piece is such a big part because I think a lot of people get, I guess, intimidated just by, because these are large assets. This is not small amounts of money that a lot of people are putting in for down payments and borrowing large amounts of money if they're using debt the right way. And man, it is so overwhelming for a lot of people that are just new getting into this, and they don't realize I had this very story with a commercial property that I bought, which was some storage units, and it was just mismanaged. That's all there was to it. I got it for a dime. It was seller financing. All I had to do was answer the phone. That's all it came down to, is just start answering the phone. The last guy that had it just had a real crap business plan and just wasn't taking care of it, was burnt out on the entire thing. And there are opportunities like this everywhere. It's just a matter of whether or not you answer the phone, whether or not and I'm talking when tenants call you, when anybody calls you, just treat this like a real live business, and the money will start coming. It just might take a little bit of time. It's a stabilization period when you buy something, but yeah, I'm on board with what you're saying there. Absolutely. 100%.
I'm gonna add that you can't live in a stock, right? And you can live in a house. That's like my guiding principle of real estate. So one thing that's really interesting is like that piece of learning seller financing. How did that work for you guys? How did you go from zero knowledge to kind of where you are today, but maybe a few steps back?
Yeah. So when I first got started, the whole idea of buying something, I glossed over it earlier because I thought it would be fun, but when I got started in real estate, I had no idea I could buy real estate. I thought you had to do the bank route. There was an agent in the office who had a 22-unit deal under contract for a client. It was seller financed in Moses Lake, Washington, hence why I'm now buying in Moses Lake. That's what first put it on the map for me. But it was a 4-plex, a 6-plex, and a 12-plex. $300,000 down, $1 million for purchase price, which is insane. I bought one of those buildings, and now that one building's worth more than the whole package that they were trying to sell. But I learned about seller financing, and my mentor at the time, who was a real estate agent who texted me on Facebook, he said, "You should buy it." And I was like, "Well, I don't have $300,000. He's like, "What if you borrowed it?" And I was like, "Well, I don't qualify." He's like, "It's seller financed." What is that? So that broached the idea of, oh, you don't have to work with a bank for everything. He gave me a little audio book from Carlton Sheets, Buying Real Estate Low to No Money Down. So I'd listen to that in my 1991 Miata. It was a CD. And I had a CD player in my Miata. So driving over the mountains, listening to Carlton Sheets. I also read a book, Deals on Wheels by Lenny Scruggs. And so those were the two monumental resources that got me the bulk of my upfront knowledge on how seller financing worked. After I figured that piece out, I started calling up property owners who owned real estate, found them on Google Maps, saw that, oh, they actually have quite a portfolio. Call them up, learn how they got to where they're at. And a lot of them did the seller finance route. So they taught me. And then eventually, when I brought Christian in the mix, we met, started working on deals together. They taught us how they played the game, and we used that to build our multifamily strategy, which is why we named the company Multifamily Strategy.
Mm-hmm. The actual strategy is just taking a whole collection of other people's knowledge, work with masters of the game. There's some people who really focus on like, hey, I want to do distressed properties and I want to try to find the best price. And what we did, instead of doing what everyone else was doing, is let's learn from the people who've absolutely mastered the game. And what we ended up finding is when people have a mature portfolio, they usually hit a point where they roll down the debt. Like they get to wherever their goal was, and they usually get a little bit past that, and they roll down all the debt, which makes them conveniently great candidates for seller financing. When the people we started interviewing them and learning from them, we learned that what they did was seller financing to pick up a lot of the portfolio. And so the people who we actually went out and met and interviewed learned their multifamily strategy are the same strategy that we implement to buy their properties today, which is awesome.
They taught us how they bought their portfolio. And then, funny enough, we use what they showed us to buy their portfolio. They already taught us how to do it, so we just repeated it.
I love that strategy. That's brilliant. And you guys talk about relationships, and we discuss relationships on this podcast a lot because, you know, we've just like most of the real estate investing industry have kind of pivoted over towards specializing on providing value to our listeners about seller financing. And there's a lot of transactional value, but the relationship value when it comes to this, you guys are preaching that to a T, which is perfect. You know, there's so much into it. You know, if you could, you already kind of touched on what you were looking for in, you know, learning from these people, but it's kind of a difficult question, but how do you describe a relationship that becomes the most beneficial so that you can get these types of deals? And if I could lead you just a little bit to what I'm looking for, like, it's not just about throwing a number down and saying, okay, these are what our terms. What type of person are you looking for who would benefit from doing seller financing and being a seller for you guys?
It depends what your objective is, because I'm not calling people to buy their stuff. A lot of people do. If you think about it in the perspective of a 19-year-old's mind, I had no affluent people in my sphere. I look around, and now my dad's finally doing better, but I look around and most of my family was living paycheck to paycheck. And when I grew up, my dad, he worked a lot. So I wouldn't see him during the week. He'd leave at 6 a.m. and get home at 9. And for a kid, you're not really up outside of those hours. So I saw a lot of my family kind of get by. Now I got to play sports until it got cost prohibitive, and that's when I stopped. But like, I didn't have these people in my sphere. So that shifts my objectives compared to some other people. And so my objective is I want to get in the room with people that have done well, that can teach me how they started doing well. Because wherever economic cycle someone's in, they're not stuck there. And I saw that with my dad now growing up. He worked really hard, and then he finally started getting ahead and ahead and ahead. And I want to be able to do the same thing, but I don't want it to be when I'm 50 or older. So I look at the people that have built the portfolio, and my objective is not, oh, I want to buy their stuff. How the heck did they get from no money to something massive? And is there a way to go faster? And so the objective is, I just want to learn how they did it and then not get kicked away from the table. I mean, you did a little differently because you did the corporate route, but what was your main objective when you were trying to meet with these people?
When I'm trying to meet with these people, I mean, it was really the same overall objective, because I got to the corporate route got me into 4 units. I got to a cool place where I had my house and I had 2 duplexes that the cash flow was, I mean, almost to the dollar equal to my mortgage. So the real estate was buying the real estate. And that was where I got the first principle of like, okay, we can buy infinite deals as long as the real estate buys the real estate. We never violate that principle. So that's one of the underwriting criteria. How does the real estate buy the real estate? But my original reason for meeting people is the same. Like, I don't have any friends or family here. I grew up actually pretty similarly. I had a dad, like, we did find we were single income. So he worked a ton of hours. I didn't get as much time with him. And I was like, how do I get freedom faster than my father? Because my father provided for my family, which I want to do for mine, but I didn't get time with him. So I'm like, how do I get time and family? I have to learn how to play this game at a higher level faster. So it's meet with the people who've actually done what we're trying to do. And that's the whole thing.
And that's why we built our model off of meeting with affluent individuals. You can totally make money buying from distressed people, but it's harder to learn good best practices from said people. And so whether we buy less deals or we don't get the best price, that is the price we're willing to pay to learn from the masters in the space. And I attribute our faster growth than most to that. We paid a little higher price to get in the room with a little better people as far as business people.
So the deal is almost like a byproduct of that. The relationship for development, personal development, is way more important.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I met with a guy, first person I met with in Moses Lake, and he started with a sixplex. I've since bought his sixplex, but I wasn't going to buy a sixplex. And he owner occupied that. He bought a seller finance, $9,000 down, $9K. And he lived in it, and he turned one of the one beds into a 2-bedroom unit because he had a family and there was bugs, and he got chased off the property. But that's the reason my little sixplex has 5 one-beds and 1 2-bed, because it's got this weird little 2-bed he built out for his family members way back when. I don't know that he even got permits on it, but but he told me you build your little stable base, and one day you're going to wake up, and for me, it was 40 apartments, me being him. He got to 40 apartments, and then he started building. He said, Cody, the richest people on planet Earth are builders. Problem is, they're the richest people till they're not. And they're not when they can't cash flow through their problems. So what he did was he built a stable base of 40 apartments, and he started developing. And that's where he really blew up his net worth. So he said, it may not be 40 for you, but I would get to 40. And when you get there and you feel stable and you've got some cash flow, you should go into development, because that is how people get insanely wealthy really quickly. They build cash flowing real estate, and they have the net worth and the cash flow to refinance and not get forced to sell. And so I did exactly what he said, and we bought a 38 plex, and it had some acreage, and we're going to convert that into a 100+ unit complex. But we're going through the development process right now. And so he served as a mentor of what to do. And that's one of the reasons that we're going to be able to. He had a goal 30 by 30, 30 units by 30. Now the next goal is for his wife, 30 million by 30 years old. The way we get there is through development, but we had to build the base. And so we took the advice of the guy who helped me get started over there.
That's amazing. Sorry, go ahead, Christian.
I was saying that was part of the strategy with the multifamily we picked up, is we picked up a lot of land with it. It just followed the underwriting criteria of the multifamily has to pay for the land, but we picked up a whole bunch of acreage in key spots paid for by the multifamily on those properties, so that we can come back through and build after we were stable. And that was I'm really proud of how well that got executed. For a 1-year acquisition, we picked up a lot of prime land. We picked up acreage on Broadway, and we picked up tons of land with highway frontage, and the real estate bought the real estate. But the main thing was we looked at what the original people taught us to do, and we executed it, and it worked. Like it's amazing. There's so many people out there that are like that, yet folks aren't trying to figure out how they did it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have already done it. And if you just execute it a similar way, it turns out it actually works.
That's amazing. If I could, and I want to dive into that one, and I appreciate I'm guiding this and jumping all around, but it's super exciting. Could we roll back to something you said, which was figuring out that down payment? So a lot of people get stuck on seller financing with like, well, how am I going to find 300 grand, right? I don't have a rich uncle. I don't have a trust fund. How does that run? What are the kind of strategies or tactics you kind of use to figure out that piece, like the down payment piece?
So we do everything in this order, and this is how it should work for every transaction you do. Deal first, then you figure out the debt, then you figure out the equity. So the deal is equal to the debt plus the equity. You figure out those two pieces, you have the deal, but you have to start with what is the opportunity. It's a fact. The deal is the hardest part, and the deal determines everything else. How much debt you can afford, if you need an equity partner, all the money follows the specific transaction. The other thing is there's way more money than there are deals, because we're not printing multifamily nearly fast enough. We're not making enough of that.
We can see that as evident by rent skyrocketing due to lack of supply.
We are, however, printing money like crazy. So there's more money than deals. When you find the right opportunity, and we have found this to be true every single time, we started, funny you mentioned 300,000. That's exactly what we had to raise to close that 38 plex.
It just happens to be the same amount as the deal I was telling you about.
That would make sense. For 300,000 on your first ever capital raise, you've never raised money before, and you go, I found the deal. Cody's done a raise. I've done no raise. We've never done anything that size.
Yeah, when we were starting.
Yeah.
That was the first time.
And so I was like, how do you, like, that is really scary. However, we came in just believing this is a great opportunity. We're going to make it work. We told the story to
four people. And we forgot to raise the money until like a couple of weeks before close. We're like, oh, we need money. And then we made 4 phone calls, and money appeared. And it didn't come from family, and it didn't come from friends. It just came from people in the space. Money appears out of nowhere if you have an opportunity. That first deal, the 22-unit portfolio, I wish I could have bought it for $1.4 million. It would have cash flowed $5,000 a month net of hard money payments for the down payment. It was a stellar deal. Could have bought it for $1.4 million, 300 down, would have owed $1.1 million. That portfolio today is worth $2.9 million, and that's 3 years later. It was a great deal then. It's a great deal today, and it would be a great deal at $2.9 million. But
I think we all have the one that got away, right?
I've got a couple that got away. I could have been at $100,000 a year cash flow without many obligations at 20 years old had I just done the deals that I knew I should have done. But I thought I was scaling too quick, and that was a fallacy.
Yeah, but see, the beauty of it is you're talking about it now because it's imprinted on your brain, that you're not going to make that mistake again. And I honestly believe that things like that are what make us grow exponentially as investors, because we start to realize I'm not going to let a deal like that slip through my fingers, ever again. I've got a handful of those deals too, where you look back and you think, God damn, I'd be in a totally different spot right now if I could have really seen the potential of something. But now I see it and I jump on it when I see it. But I want to back up just for a quick second and ask a question of you guys. I wished I'd asked at the beginning, but why multifamily? Why not single family? Why did you guys decide to focus on multi-unit projects?
If it costs the same amount, why wouldn't you buy more? From a risk mitigation standpoint, you can buy a duplex, you can buy a house, you buy a fourplex, all for the same price. You can also buy, we've got a buddy who buys in the Midwest. He buys these little $28,000, $30,000, $40,000 houses. But I'm like, okay, what happens when you pay it off? You rent those out for $800, you got your little 2% rule deal. You get rid of all the debt risk. You're only left with $800. Net of your management and everything, maybe you get 500 of that. So if everything went well, did you build the business you wanted to build? For us, multifamily, my first 12plex, the rents on it, like net operating income on it, it's over $100,000 right now per year. If I just get it paid off, $100,000 a year is okay. Can't do that with a house. Maybe on an Airbnb in a great location, but it's very difficult to project long-term and say Airbnb will be around forever. It's easy to say that multifamily rentals will be. So I just look at the end product, and this is my favorite line I ever heard from anybody. Like, if everything went right, would you have built the business that you wanted to build? And I can't fathom doing that with houses. I just don't see the rental upside, even if it didn't cost a dime to buy it. I don't see it, even if it went well, being able to produce enough results to scale long term.
Which was exactly my thought. Scale is the whole thing. Single family, if you try to raise money for a single family, that's not really exciting. People want to be part of a 38plex. They want to be part of the stellar 12plex deal you just found. If you don't have any money and you're trying to raise money for houses, it's hard. Then you look at a 110 unit portfolio to get to the cash flow goal that we needed. Or at least that's yours. I'm at exactly 100 units. But you have all these. Can you imagine doing that one house at a time? Find capital, line up deals.
And I know people that have done that. I know people with hundreds of houses.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't envy them.
And did they do it in that time frame?
Absolutely not.
Which is the big thing. How fast can you go? It took a couple months to buy 38 units. If we try to buy 38 houses, that would take several years.
You could do it in a couple months, but the amount of headaches,
for the amount of like signatures.
Yeah, we'd just be signing forever. It's just
so many transactions. So
not ideal.
Well, no, it's not. And time's a major commodity when it comes to investing. And if we don't treat it as that, and we just, I want 200 houses by the time I'm 50, that's, gosh, you're never going to hit it. First of all, at my age, it's only 10 years away, but it's like, it just takes such an outrageous amount of time and effort and headaches. And I asked this question to just about every one of our guests that we have on the show, because I'm hoping at some point, anybody who's focused headlong into single family residences, they're going to finally see all of this advice coming from the multifamily side, that this is where it's at if you want to scale. The velocity of money is exponentially higher when you've got a lot of doors under one roof. You're going to say something, Cody?
That said, I've got a buddy who's worth like 50, 60 million and all he does is single family. So you can't knock it. You can do it either way. He's I'm friends with him online, and all I see of his posts are just problems. So like we post the fun stuff, and we don't post all the bad stuff. We post some of it, but all I see on his is just like evictions and deadbeat tenants, cops kicking in doors. I'm like, granted, he's got 50, 60 million to back it. He's 20 times bigger than me, but he's been doing it for a while, and I just don't want all those problems. I think it's easier to manage the way we do it with multifamily, but you could do it either way.
And I think the other thing is the pivot financially, like with the rates at the moment, is a single family home viable as a rental business? I'm not sure at the moment. I live in San Diego, and prices are still high, rates are high, and actually just running numbers on potential seller financing properties, even to add an ADU, just they're not lining up at the moment, just purely where the numbers are. If you go down the traditional banking route rather than the seller financing route. So one thing you said is you don't post the bad stuff. Come on then, let's have it. What is the bad stuff? What's the biggest lesson learned or crazy situation? Or
Yeah, I mean, as far as buildings go, I'm not going to specify which buildings, but we've had multiple septics go out within a week of closing. Like they just completely fail. Tree roots have gone through lines. We've had to replace lines. Water heaters have blown up. I've had electrical outlets disintegrate. We had I had Zinsco panels. I just replaced them, but some of my sockets literally blew up. They got too hot and poof, and then there was no socket. They're just disintegrated. So I mean, there's been issues like that. Like, oh, we should probably fix that. And you fix that with a check, and you either have it or you don't. If you don't, you throw it on a credit card, and you try and stay afloat for a little while. But yeah, we've had that. Had a roof that completely failed. That cost $140,000 to get redone. And
or for the contractor who quoted it at 90 with a 15% buffer.
Yeah, and he went over another 50. So
jeez,
we had contractors just rip us off, and they don't know how to do math. I'm like, you guys, if you're going to do this business, you best know how to add. And they just didn't add up all the expenses, and so they bid us too low. But learned on do not exceed contracts and all that fun stuff that just costs money and makes you wonder why you're doing what you're doing.
Right. I'm curious. I'd like to pivot just a little bit into some of the stuff that you guys do with seller financing, specifically what kind of terms it is that you guys are looking for. Sure. Are you typically looking for no money down? Are you looking for 10%, 20%? Sounds like you guys are doing some capital raises for portions or even all of the down payments. What's the deal structure look like?
I like 10% down, and we've just funded some of them. We've raised money for others, borrowed money as debt, done it as equity. An equity partner with a fixed buyout agreement is very similar to a second mortgage, except for they get some tax benefits. And if there's a no further encumbrances on your seller note, that's a good way to get around that, because functionally it is very similar to debt. And so we've done equity partners, debt partners. But as far as seller financing goes, my first deal, 30-year fully amortized deal, no balloon, fixed rate. We've done 10-year balloons, amortized over 30, 15-year interest only, stuff like that.
And so the let's use that 30-year fully amortized deal that you were talking about. What type of interest rate did you get? And what was your, I guess, I'm sure that you guys probably calculate a cash on cash metric whenever you're doing your underwriting. So do you guys have a particular metric that you shoot for on cash on cash? Or what do you guys?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I look at debt coverage ratio. That matters more to me. I mean, it's one thing to buy a deal and have a sick cash on cash return. But again, if you make 100% cash on cash and you only put $1,000, your debt coverage ratio could be 1.01, right? So I'd rather look at what's my net income in comparison to my debt obligation that I'm taking on, because debt is an option. And just make sure that debt covers well, because I don't want to build a cool portfolio and just lose it. That would be unwise.
Yeah, and what are you shooting for on a debt coverage ratio? Like, do you have a minimum?
I like 1.5. So if my debt costs $100,000 or if it costs $1 million, I'll just multiply that by 1.5x and make sure my net operating income is there.
Gotcha.
That said, when we're fully stabilized, which we just did a few evictions, so we're a little less than this right now, but we typically hover around 2.
Yep, and 2's a great place to be. Every month I can stack another month of mortgage payments.
excellent. I scribbled some notes, so I'll put some notes in there for people looking at those equations, and people that struggle with maths. Maybe Cody, maybe I'm one of those people. Just saying. So I appreciate that.
The main thing is let's simplify it, right? If you have debt and you have to pay $1 every single month, I want to make at least more than $1 net of all my expenses. So if I have a 2x ratio, it means if my debt costs $1 a month, my investment nets me $2 a month. So I could pay it 2 times every single month out of the dividends from the real estate. The higher that ratio is, the less likely I will ever have to come out of pocket. And that's the whole philosophy with the real estate, because we're not working with dollars, we're working with tens of thousands of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars. If I buy a deal and my mortgage is $1,500 a month, I want the net income on the asset to be like what does that be? $2,250 a month, 1.5x. If it's higher than that, bigger ratio, let's say a 2x debt coverage ratio, I would net $3,000 after taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, management, all that stuff. But the reason that this is important is debt is an option. So if you want to increase your cash flow returns, you can't, when you're talking about the real estate, you can either optimize the real estate or you can optimize the debt. I like to optimize the debt because that's easy to negotiate. You can raise rent and you can decrease expenses, but that takes time. Negotiating the promissory note with the seller financier upfront is easier. So you can either borrow less money or borrow cheaper money. And that's optimizing the debt product. And that's the way that we increase our ratios.
And to take it one step simpler, the underwriting criteria is how do we own it and how do we never lose it? So the how do we buy it part is just, that's pretty easy. It's okay, we find a deal and what makes the deal work. And then we figure out the debt and equity. We talked about that earlier, deal, then debt, then equity. That's how we buy it. How do we never lose it is we need cash flow on long-term fixed rate debt. Now, a cash on cash number I don't care as much about because in a market like Moses Lake, I just want to buy deals and I want to own more and more of that market because that helps me influence rent and that helps us expand. So I can actually take a lower cash on cash return as long as I've answered the question, how do I never lose it? So for the example of your first deal, 30-year fully amortized fixed rate debt. You get that figured out, there's not a whole lot of balloon attached to that. It'll pay itself off. You've answered the question right on the front end.
Real estate buys the real estate.
One place I'll look at cash on cash and cap rate and some of the other metrics is just if I have an incoming balloon, I just have to answer the question before I close. When we hit that balloon, how am I transitioning this into new debt or writing a check to pay off the debt? And if I can do one of those two things, we're good to proceed and we close the deal. But that's all it is for underwriting. How do I own it? How do I never, ever lose it? How am I never in a position to have to sell? If I can do both those things, I'm going to buy it.
And to take it one step further, the only time LTV matters is if you have to get new debt or you can't afford to hold the property. That's it. If you have to get new debt, and it doesn't mean your debt. If you're selling it, someone else has to get new debt, LTV matters. Because if you're getting cashed out, well, if you have no equity or you're over leveraged, LTV wise, well, that's a bad place to be. But if you owed $1.5 million on $1 million asset and it was a 30-year fixed rate mortgage that cash flowed $5,000 a month or $4,000 a month or whatever the numbers are, like I'd say it doesn't really matter what your LTV is unless your balloon was due tomorrow. So one more piece on that.
Yeah.
So curious on your exit plan. So talking about fixed rate debt, I love the 30-year fully amortized debt. That's the ultimate right there, right? Just like what Christian was saying, you've essentially answered question number one right up front, but you've got fixed rate debt that with a balloon payment on it. So now you're approaching, say you closed something 3 years ago in a 5-year balloon and we go into this type of a market that we're seeing right now. Are you guys thinking about exit plans or have you set this up well enough on the front end with your value adds and your typical yearly, rent increases that you feel pretty safe on that? Or what is your escape plan?
If we needed to refinance, we'd take it to agency and we built the net worth piece up. And that was a big thing. Got to build the balance sheet if you want to scale. So we focused on that for a while we were building up the cash flows. So we would take our stuff to agency if we needed to refinance. But
can you explain to our listeners what agency is? Agency, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all that good stuff.
It's just a different debt product. And it's mainly for commercial multifamily. And it's just more of a long-term stabilized debt product. And so instead of maybe doing a 5-year balloon or a 10-year balloon that's amortized over 25 or 30 with your credit unions, you can get 10-year balloon and 10-year full term interest only, or you can just do 10-year with a portion of an interest only, so you can stabilize your asset and then it rolls over to an AM schedule. But it's just a different debt product. And that's why we do the deal first, you figure out your deal. Then you figure out what debt product works best for the specific deal. And if you need money, then you figure out the equity. But
as a debt product primarily for commercial multifamily. You're not going to be looking for this on your duplexes, on your fourplexes, your
Not going to happen.
family.
Yeah.
They actually love that 5 to 40 unit. They like some of the small stuff.
Yeah, there are discounts right now for 5 to 50 unit complex. It might be 5 to 80. It's somewhere in that 5 to 50, I think. But they're doing discounts on that right now because they want to place that size loan amounts.
That's awesome. And in terms of areas you're investing in, excuse me, I'll cut that. In terms of areas you're investing,
no edits. We don't edit.
In terms of areas you're investing in, is it Moses Lake? You said, are you just investing there? Are you looking further afield?
We're in Grant County, King County, and Mason County. And he bought a duplex in Kitsap, but we own a little 7-plex in a Seattle suburb called Tequila. I've got 98 apartments, I think. No, I got 100 apartments now in Moses Lake because we bought the duplex.
Oh yeah, we just got the duplex. Yeah.
So I own 100 apartments in Grant County, a 12-plex in Quincy, and 88 in Moses Lake. And then a 7-plex in Tequila. We own a triplex right next to the resort in Mason County, Union, Washington. And then we got the resort.
Yeah, resort's awesome.
And is that been sorry, go ahead, Carl.
I was going to ask about the resort. Go ahead with your question, and I'd love to hear more about what this resort is because that's something I've always been interested in.
I think we can hop to the resort for sure.
Yeah, I mean we bought that to celebrate. So we bought our 100 apartments. We had that goal, 100 apartments in 2 years. We did it in 11 months, and to celebrate, we had a buddy who sent us this resort off market. He said it's gonna be 0 down, seller financed. It'll cash for 20 grand a month. Problem was it was $1 million down, seller financed, and it did cash for 20 grand a month. However, it was on the market forever, and he said it was off market, and he said it was gonna be 0 money down. So we looked at it because it was 0 down. We saw the property, and it was really beautiful. And then I forgot about it. And then Christian said, "We have to go back. Let's go look at it." And so we went and looked at it again, and we wrote it up, and that was how we celebrated hitting our 2-year goal in 11 months. But we bought that, and that was built by the set designer that partnered with Walt Disney for the Robin Hood movie back in the 30s.
1934. Hence
the resort being built in 1934 and being named the Robin Hood. But that was built by the Disney set designer, and it's just a fun little piece of history there on the Hood Canal.
Very cool. Kyle, your brain is whirring.
Well, yeah, I told you I got 1,000 questions here. I want to know about the resort. Is this short-term rentals? Is this on a lake? Kind of describe it a little bit. I want to know what you got.
It's on the Hood Canal, and it's right outside Olympic National Park. Cabin retreat. You got hot tubs. One of them's got sauna.
Kayaks.
Kayaks. We're getting jet skis. But it's just a cabin retreat. It's 2 hours from Portland, 2 hours or less from Seattle, depending on where you're at in Seattle. One end of Seattle to the other end of Seattle is 2 hours. So, I mean, you can do your best getting there. But, yeah, it's not that far from the main areas. And as far as a retreat, to just hang out, go see the seals, go see orcas, have a mimosa in a hot tub. Someone had a bubble bath in a hot tub. They got a little drunk.
You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
It's frowned upon.
They poured some bubbles in the hot tub, and in the morning, there was just this mountain of bubbles. People have fun.
Nice.
And that's the whole premise of it. It is fun to take family.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun to hold masterminds there, and it's just a baller asset.
Yeah, it is the most quintessential Pacific Northwest thing I've ever been at. You go there, salmon are running up the stream, tons of trees. It rains constantly because of the Olympic Mountains. Absolutely gorgeous. It's a really cool location, which was the main reason that we went there and went, we have to do this. This is the first thing that we're doing that is just for us. It's a little deviation from multifamily, but I'm like, I'm doing this because I want to own this asset.
And when we pay it off in the next 5 years, it can do whatever it wants because we don't have to focus on just the monetization. But then we just scale on, okay, what's the next adventure? Maybe it's a castle, maybe it's a skyscraper, but we're not there yet, so we're not worried about it.
I'm thinking vineyard.
Vineyard would be
We'll
fun.
find out.
Vineyard would be cool.
We looked at one in Texas, and it was a negative 5% cap rate.
Okay.
Sounds like a great investment.
Some people on the internet say you can't have a negative cap rate, but they live in pro forma land.
Right. Which is a terrible, evil place to live. I like the castle idea, though. I tell you what, I've been wanting to build a castle and live in it since I was about 4 years old, and here I am, almost 40, and I still just as badly, if not worse, want to do the exact same thing. So, you want to talk about a kick-ass short-term rental property, man? That would be something else, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest. Where it just feels like Great Britain, for example. Shout out John Hooper. They're freaking everywhere. It'd just be the coolest thing in the world to have one.
I'm going to throw out there a lighthouse.
Oh,
that'd be a fun one.
My buddy owns a castle in Arlington.
Arlington, Texas?
Cool
Arlington, Washington. Not quite.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Very cool. I do have one question about partnerships. So from the sounds of it, you guys have gotten some pretty amazing assets. You guys partner, and it sounds like, other than the purposes of maybe taking some of the sting off of a large down payment that maybe you're not raising money for, and other than just doing that, why partner in the first place if you can do this probably on your own? And it sounds like you guys have been investing independently of each other. But what does the partnership bring to the table?
1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. I'm a math guy, but when we work together, 1 + 1 = 3. And then we added his wife to the mix when she retired from working as a teacher. She started working with us. Neither of us thought she was going to do as well as she did, but now 1 + 1 + 1 = 5.
It just feels like more like it's 7.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So while we could absolutely do what we did independent of each other, at least I knew I could, because I had proved it with 30 apartments. Christian had 4. Christian still would have kept buying duplexes. He would have bought the 7-plex without me in Tequila, because he found that one.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have kept working his job, and he would have been fine.
I probably would have made it to I was thinking about this recently, actually. I probably would have made it to 16 units instead of 100 partnered.
Yeah. But everything that we've done together it's made everything a lot easier. We've booked different opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And the fact that we're both booking opportunities and we're both giving it 100%, we don't view partnership as 50-50. It's 100-100. We're always just giving it everything we need to give it to make it happen. And that has worked. We've gotten a lot of opportunities we wouldn't have had just doing it on our own. And it's allowed us to scale faster. Instead of being, multimillionaires each a couple times over, we would maybe be worth $1 million.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably just about right.
But $1 million today doesn't really do anything. I mean, it's a hard truth. So, yeah, I mean, it could have done it. It just would have taken longer.
The one thing I always say when we bring up partnership is there's no such thing as an even partnership. I just want to add that. I know that wasn't really the question, but when everyone's going 100%, like when we started this, hands down, bar none, Cody knew how to buy real estate. And I still think he's probably the best buyer of real estate in the country. I've never met anyone alive who can analyze a deal in less than 4 seconds and go, yes, we're doing that. And here's how we're doing it. Cody's amazing at that. So when we started, I had a college degree and a sales background. I'd done a reno project and I owned a little bit of real estate. I didn't bring nearly as much to the table as him. We get to the point where we own a property management company and an education company. We're managing multiple contractors. That's where my brain really kicks in. All the not sexy stuff, like working with the accountants and figuring out QuickBooks and making sure that we get through taxes and do creative structure correctly. I'm really good at that. And in our current phase where we're stabilizing, Cody doesn't get to have as much fun buying.
No, I'm not allowed to buy. So I sit on the sideline and twiddle my thumbs.
No, he doesn't. Cody actually does a ton for the business, but he focuses hard on the refinances and optimizing our opportunities and sales and bringing on new business.
I manage the cash flows.
Yeah. But when we started, Cody's worth way more to the business than I am. Right now in our current phase, I'm probably worth a little bit more than you. To our business, the way. Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't want to, it sounds weird when I say it. But right now, in this phase, right now in optimization, that is where my mind works the best. And then after we optimize, we go into the next build phase where we'll both work on it, but Cody will have more value. If people get weird about partnerships, that's where they all blow up. And it's the same as marriages. People get weird about money. I'm doing more. I don't like this anymore. We need to, it's look.
Yeah. And how do you put a value on working with the CPAs? I don't want to work with my CPA. I mean, Mike, you're nice, but I don't want to spend time in the office just going through numbers. My job is to go create problems that you have to go fix. And then we make money from it.
There you go.
And I like fixing the problems, and Cody loves creating them. And between the two of them, it's like, yeah, you're going to get frustrated with each other, and things are never even. One of us is always bringing more value at some point. But as long as everyone's going 100%, we have a policy of the partnership is 50-50.
And we don't compete, and it doesn't matter at any point. It's like, I'm not entitled to 60% or 80% regardless, even though I figured out how to put together the 38plex. Like that would be stupid. Like someone could make the argument that we wouldn't be here without me, but we also wouldn't be here without Christian because we would have lost it.
Right.
Like it's
No,
one
that's a
thing,
good point.
it's another thing to never lose it.
Yeah, and some stuff is just hard to quantify. Like you can't really be like, wow, the amount of legal work that we did is worth exactly this many dollars to us for how much we could have saved.
Now I get to, now I get to be 70% owner.
Yeah,
That's
it's
stupid.
And it sounds intuitive and it sounds obvious, but I see it happen in way more than 50% of partnerships. Like a majority of partnerships fall apart because of some stupid BS that could have been resolved by just having an agreement of we never compete with each other. We're headed the same direction. We have a set target. And until we hit that target, we're not reevaluating anything.
And when we hit it, we're not really going to change anything anyway.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
need to.
Stick
The
with
money
what works.
won't matter at that point.
We wanted 100 units. And when we hit it, we're like, do we want to change? No. Okay, excellent. Let's set the next goal. And then we're not going to discuss this again until we hit it.
Love it. And I'm curious, Cody, you know, you guys mentioned a little bit ago about you can look at a property and know within just a few seconds whether or not it's anything to go after. How do you do that?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So there's something I learned about in math that I'd say less than 1% of real estate investors actually understand. They might know of it, but there's a very select few. And I've met people worth hundreds of millions of dollars that don't understand this, which is crazy to me. But you can get there without it. When I look at deals, I need to know two things. What is the net income in relation to the price? And what is the factor rate of the debt that I'm borrowing? That's it. And a factor rate is similar to an interest rate, but it's a little different. Interest rate, everybody knows. Like, oh, I'm going to borrow at 6%. I'm going to arbitrage it and invest it at 8%. I'll make a 2-point spread. Well, that's great. But you also have debt pay down. And typically not everything is IO. You have some IO debt products, but not everything is. So when buying real estate, you have to look at what's the true cost of capital. And the way to calculate that is called the factor rate. So if you borrow at 6% interest on a 30-year AM, the factor rate, while your interest rate's 6%, your factor rate's 7.2. And I'm rounding up. It's like 7.192. But if you don't buy at a 7.2% cap rate, you will, in fact, lose money. Because it'll have to go, it's not just going to interest, but it's going to debt pay down. And people don't typically know how to quantify that and understand why it works the way it does. So I just studied an amortization schedule. I was like, how much gets allocated as a percentage to debt pay down in the first year? And then I quantified that in a little spreadsheet and figured out, okay, if you borrow at 4% interest on a 30-year AM, your annual factor rate is 5.7288%. So you basically have to borrow at a 5.7% interest or a 5.7 cap, or you'll lose money due to debt pay down. And I just factor that. And once you memorize it, you memorize it. But I just looked at a relation of what's the actual true cost of capital. And then how do we make more than that on a piece of real estate? And if it makes more, great. You make a spread. That's good leverage. But borrowing at 4% interest to make 5 doesn't work unless it's IO. And so I just memorized those numbers and understood why it worked the way it did. And I can look at a deal and say it's going to work or it's not.
Wow, that's
you don't need
awesome.
to calculate. It's just it's subtraction. You don't even need multiplication. Like it's either you have a positive spread or a negative spread. And I just want it to be positive. If it's positive, I'm going to put as little money down as possible. If it's negative, this is why you have to put 40 to 50% down in Seattle or LA, because you're losing money. You have a negative spread on the debt. Even if you're borrowing at on a 4% cap rate, you'll still lose money due to debt pay down. So you have to put a lot more down because you make money on the dollars you put down and you lose money on the dollars you borrow. And that's just something I learned.
And for those who aren't going to come in and just memorize every cap rate, because and you can, or sorry, not every factor rate, rather.
Yeah.
The simple equation is it's just your true cost of capital. So what is my capital cost? It's principal plus interest divided by the amount that I borrow. And that is your factor rate.
Ta-da.
And so interest only is really easy because principal plus interest is the
Just
interest. So 5%
It's 5%. You
It's
could
5%.
You could buy a 5 cap, and you could borrow at 5% interest only, and you won't lose a dime.
where people just get confused is like, well, if it's amortized debt, you just add in the principal payment. And what would the interest rate be if that entire payment was the interest? And you compare it to the cap rate. If you want to just put it in like a really easy to conceptualize box, you can do that on a calculator. Plug it in a mortgage calculator, divide it by how much you borrow. That's my factor rate. Is it less than my cap rate? Awesome. Then the more money I borrow, the larger spread I'll make on that money.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to borrow as much as possible. Let's go after the lowest down payment on the spread. And that's the easy math. So when you hear the basic numbers, you can listen to it, whip out your calculator, and within, if you're Cody, in 4 seconds, if you're Christian, like a minute and a half, you'll be like, yes, we're going to buy this deal.
But that's why I look at the deals, because like I just understand the what is the true cost of what it takes to do something. And I can see that in my head. You don't have to see it in your head. You can do it on your phone. But when you understand why it works the way it does, you're in the top 1% of real estate investors, because nobody really understands this, and they can't really quantify it. And if you can, it makes it really easy to buy stuff 100% leveraged, because you understand the actual costs associated with putting something together, and making sure you don't lose it.
For those listening to the podcast, that's the secret sauce. Like, learn that math. If you don't learn anything else, learn that math, and you can know whether you can say yes or no to a deal.
Skip back 20 seconds, 30 seconds, so on. And I think the other thing is then, you remove that pro forma sway of, hey, don't worry, this is all going to be great. So I really, really appreciate that. We want to be mindful of your time. You talked about your course. What's the best way people can get in contact with you, connect with your material, connect with your content?
Yeah, so the site is themultifamilystrategy.com. You can also message us on YouTube, Cody and Christian Multifamily Strategy. We're also on Instagram. I'm at Doing Cody Things, because I am, in fact, always doing Cody things. And Christian Osgood, because no one has his name.
Which is very convenient for marketing purposes. But at Christian Osgood.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to get you back on at some point, because my mind's kind of still being pieced back together. So that was super interesting. Kyle, anything to add?
I would like to have you guys back on for a 1-hour episode just to talk about what we discussed for the last 3.5 minutes. I think there's an incredible amount of value with that Cody was talking about and Christian was talking about with how to look at these deals, because I'm an old school investor and I don't look at it that way, and that's because of my ignorance, not because I think you're wrong. It's because I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention to what you were just discussing. So I love it. I love learning new ways to invest and look at deals. And I'm going to rewatch and re-listen to this, 6 or 7 times until it's cemented in my brain, and give it a shot and see if I can make the numbers work the right way, which sounds like what you guys are doing. So we really appreciate your knowledge. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. And we'll be back next week.
Thank you for listening to the Investories podcast. We all have a story. What's yours? The Investories podcast.